first thing I do is I kind of just map out the song because I'm learning what the song is. So like, okay, I don't care what the drum beat is, but let's just figure out what the chord progression is all the way through, and what's the A part, what's the B part, what's the bridge or pre-chorus or whatever, and just like mapping that out and just learning what the song is before any kind of crazy sounds are kind of brought up.
It's a hard thing these days, especially in the pop kind of, crossing into hip hop world where a lot of times an artist will come to me with just a section, and they're kind of like, I've got this song, and I'm like, okay, well, this isn't a song yet. This is just a part, So like, can we flesh this out into a song? And is it going to be the exact same loop, whatever, a little guitar loop or something they found on Slice? Is it going to be that for the whole song, or are we going to try and diverge and maybe have a different chord progression at some point, or is it going to go 1, 4, 6, 5 for the whole song, which is totally fine. It's just maybe your melody is going to have to evolve. Like Taylor Swift's the queen of that, where it's literally the same chord progression the entire song.
Right.
But her melody and the rhythm of her melody changes. So this pre-chorus is obviously a pre-chorus. Now we're in the chorus. This feels like a chorus, but it's literally the chord progression doesn't change in the slightest.
Right. And it's literally 1, 6, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. But no, it is, that idea of when a songwriter or someone, solo artist in particular, kind of comes to you with an idea, and then it's your job to, because you and I both know that it could be anything, and it wouldn't be hard to turn it into, we could do this like a pop punk thing with real drums and guitars. We could turn it into a dance pop thing with a 4 on the floor, and all synths. But it's like, once you kind of have a map of the chords and the melody, and then you just pinpoint one tiny thing in the aesthetic, like, I want to kind of do like a 80s vibe, or like a kind of a grungy vibe, or kind of a, whatever, like they just need one little thing, and you're like, okay, I'm going to take the production in that direction. And
right, that think of that little moment of inspiration that kind of triggers the rest of the song. Yeah. What when you're working on a production, what are some of those things that maybe can be that little trigger? What do you gravitate towards? Most times,
for the artists I work with, it's a reference of some kind. They'll throw out some band name or some artist or some song that is just, it gives me an idea of, like I said, the aesthetic of the production. So it instantly makes me think, okay, dance hall beat versus, like a kind of a 4 on the floor kick drum kind of beat versus, real drums versus obviously drum machine drums, or organic instruments like acoustic guitar and maybe more of like a Rhodes sound versus like a straight up synth, obvious, like
a Juno.
Like a Juno DX7, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, because the chords, hopefully, the song is at a place where the chords are the chords and the melody is the melody and the lyrics are the lyrics. So then it's just all about the presentation of those chords, essentially is kind of, and then everything kind of stems from that, the bass line you decide to play, whether it's a synth bass or a real bass or a combination of both. It all kind of, and that's the scary thing about finding that point, because that starts you down a road that you can go back and you can start a different road. But it's like, once you kind of start going down there, it's
very hard to turn around.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is scary. Cause like from the start, I know that there's literally thousands of roads, diverging roads, right? Where, and we're just going to pick one, and hopefully it's going to work out.
All of life is that, right?
I know.
The butterfly effect.
Yeah. The more that I know, the more skilled I get at production and using different soft synths and different, the more I understand how many roads there actually are. And, sometimes the artist is already kind of, that's it. Well, I think I heard on one of your more recent podcasts, someone talking about just the artist having a vision, and if the artist doesn't have any kind of vision, it's really difficult, because you have to pick a vision and you have to hope that it's the right one for them.
Yeah. That happened to me recently where
I hate it.
And then I had to redo it.
Yeah.
And another project that I was working on, I did. I know I don't hope for this for most projects for myself, obviously, and also for others, but I think I did like 3 or 4 different versions before we found a direction for a song that we liked. But by the time that had happened, I'd gained so much trust in the art. Like the artist had like really like trusted me after that.
Definitely.
Which is like,
which is
okay,
awesome.
cool.
Yeah.
He was willing to kind of go back, start over until we found the right path. So there's definitely like doing that hard work can often bring a lot of, dedication or whatever from the artist.
I agree,
but
100%.
But it's hard sometimes,
I think just having the heads up and knowing that that's what you're in for, I think is a good place to be. Like when an artist comes and says, I've got these ideas. Like I work with one guy who's an amazing lyricist, and he's a very good singer. That's kind of where his skill set lies. And so he comes and leans on me for a lot of the musician stuff. But he's got this he just loves all kinds of music, anything from, 70s all the way up to like Harry Styles and Taylor Swift and, and so he's always got these really unique references. And so when I work with him, I know that going in, we're going to like demo out 3 or 4 versions of this to kind of see which direction he wants to go. But the hard thing with that is going back to what I learned from Arn, the melody and the songwriting core, like a lot of that stuff changes depending on the aesthetic. Like if we're going for a dance pop thing, then I would do it at this tempo and I would do it in this key so that your voice is sitting at this higher register and you can sing a little bit more in your head voice and it kind of have a smooth sound. But if we're going to do a rockier thing, I might actually do it at a slower tempo. I might drop the key so that you can be more in your chest voice,
Right.
Or if we're going to put this counter melody part on a guitar, I might want to drop it down to a section in the guitar where it's actually like cool to play it,
Right.
Not in like, F sharp or something. Like I might drop it down to like D or something so I can play it in a drop D tuning. And so it's not just like demoing out a couple versions of the song. It's like essentially making 4 completely unique.
That's so cool.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, it can become an insane amount of work.
Have you been able to kind of expedite that, make those kind of processes faster?
Yeah. A lot of it, like you said, a lot of it's just with the trust and communication of the artist. And the more you work with them, the more you understand what they're trying to accomplish and where their aesthetic lies. And it usually helps you pick the right road. But that takes time with those relationships and that understanding because all artists communicate music different. And in mixing, that's one thing I've really learned is revisions and notes and those kind of things. Like everybody communicates differently in terms of how they talk about sound and how they talk about how it makes them feel. And the biggest thing with music is we're trying to create something that makes people feel something. And if something in the production is not making that feeling, then how do you shift that? And how do you translate that to like an EQ move or like, I need to change the settings on my compressor? It's like, it's so weird to think about, but it's like, they say, I'm not feeling the right way about this vocal. So is the tone wrong? Is the angstiness, does it need more saturation? Maybe it needs more atmosphere around it. Maybe, a little bit of audible reverb would give a little bit of that sentiment, but you need to like decode that. And
sometimes it's just lowering the drums, right? So they're less in your face. You know what I mean? Like, and that's, literally, that could be it.
Like the more minutia of the mix note is, can you turn the vocal up? Like even something like that, I have to think, okay, they don't want me to raise the fader by a dB and a half. They want the vocal to be more present in the mix. So what do I have to do that? Maybe it's just turning up the fader. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's something to do with the tonality. Maybe it's cutting certain frequencies of the accompanying instruments so that the vocal sticks out more, and it's our job.
Maybe it's just presence.
Maybe it's just presence. Like, and there's literally, and every mix is different, and going into the mix and trying to decode that and get it so that it's sounding and making them feel what they want to feel. And hopefully it's going to make the listener feel what they're hoping it's going to make them feel. It's a challenging process, man. Especially when you're like, I guess I'll just, do a little parallel compression and that'll solve it.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, it's an emotional art form and we have to give it an emotional labor. You know what I mean? Like I feel like people don't think about I think that's what's hard about producing is how much of an emotional labor it is.
Yes.
Like I've talked to people on the show about like, sometimes you can't take on too many productions because you're already in a relationship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like even to that point, so it's definitely something where it's like boundaries are hard because it could become really all encompassing.
Definitely.
You know?
Well, and that's one of the things I've enjoyed, not moving away from production, but because I've transferred more into mixing now, I'd say about 90% of my work is mix work. I only really do, like last year, I think I did 2 production projects. The year before that, I probably did 3. So it allows me to be a lot more selective and invest a lot more of myself into each production, as opposed to just like
when you're actually doing one.
Yeah. Like if I had to do, 10 or 15 productions a year like that, I would stretch myself so thin, and each one would just be like, sure. Like, yeah, we'll just put a guitar in there. I don't care. Go ahead. It wouldn't have that emotional investment of self that I think makes a lot of these productions really special,
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like like you're like me in that you're very meticulous and you take your time with the productions that you work on.
Yes.
Am I gathering that?
I try not to take, I have in the past run into the problem of taking too much time where, like I'll get a production and I can get meticulous. And so I've, over the last couple of years, I've tried to get not faster, but just more efficient and more decisive on things rather than.
That's something I'm working on also.
Yeah. It's tough though. Cause the more knowledgeable you get, the more you understand that you don't know anything and that there's an infinite,
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. When someone says, I heard this 1975 song and they had this cool, little muted guitar part. Can we do something like that on our record? You'd think it's like, oh yeah, I'll just record that in 5 minutes. But it's like, okay, well, no, like what guitar, what are the notes? Like what are the parts that are already in there? What harmony am I going to make by starting to add, if I'm going from, the root to the second, all of a sudden I'm making this 9 chord. Do we have 9 chords in there already? Is it going to change the vibe? And, you can just go down, like I could spend weeks just trying to record that one guitar part.
Yeah. Wow.
It gets
No,
dangerous.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. And then sometimes you're just like, okay, strike a vibe, and then you go down the road and then you're there and that's it. You know what I mean? Like you never know. But I wanted to, before we jump into like the whole mixing thing, with all your co-writing credits on the songs that you're working on, is this a big part of your revenue stream? Is this something that you're actively trying to do, or it's just if you happen to help them out with some chords, help them out with some lyrics, you get a nice little credit, but it's not like a goal, it's just a byproduct.
Yeah, it's more of the byproduct. Like most of my revenue is coming from my mix work. But it is just, it's usually something that's discussed up front, like if they come to me wanting a full top to bottom production, then we just talk about, the co-writing and the production splits and the publishing splits and all that kind of stuff. Most of the acts that I'm co-writing with are kind of developing up and coming acts. So there's not a huge amount of revenue from that. So it's not
right.
It's not something that I'm doing to kind of create myself some passive income or anything. Like it's just because of what I'm contributing, we just find a fair split, and it's usually just I join in as another member. So if it's a 3-piece, then all of a sudden everything's split 4 ways, and I'm just an extra, because I don't usually like. Arn had a system that worked really good for him, where he would always take, like, I was either 33 or 66. So if it was his song that he was giving to a band because he was a songwriter, he would take kind of the lion's share. If he was contributing to a song that was already written, he would take a third. But for him, it was never, I guess, worth it to take less than a third. I haven't really adopted that. Because I don't ever want to take more than one of the artists in the band,
Yeah.
And getting into splits is a big thing because everything's different now. Like it all used to be with bands, and there'd usually be 1 or 2 main songwriters,
right?
And either
Lennon,
the band,
McCartney, right?
Yeah, and either the band acknowledged that, and whoever brought the song would get at least 51% of the song, and then the rest would be divvied up among the band members and the producer and whoever.
Sure.
Or they would do the U2 thing, and no matter who brought the song idea, everything's always split evenly between the band members, and then it's just which I always think is the better approach because.
Agreed. Yeah.
You never know what people are contributing that's adding value to the song, Like some people might not be contributing a bunch musically, but they're contributing a whole bunch of marketing and a whole bunch of, or when everyone's in the room together, someone says something that sparks an idea that someone else goes off and writes, but they were the one that kind of put that out into
Right,
the
you can't-
ether. So like, what's that worth?
So hard to judge what's worth what. You know what I mean? There's no way to calculate these things really. You got to just. But if everybody's split evenly, then everyone has equal. It's equal